A fragment of parchment, no bigger than a business card, sits in Vault 7B at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. Catalog number 4Q203. The Book of Enoch was removed from the Bible by the Council of Laodicea in 364 CE. For 17 centuries, banned, hidden, called too dangerous for Christian teaching. When archaeologists discovered the Dead Sea Scrolls in 1947 at Qumran, 11 separate copies of Enoch turned up, more than most books that made it into the Old Testament. Scholars who translated the oldest fragments found something the Church never wanted discussed. Chapters 10 and 21 of Enoch describe a prison located at a depth the text specifies as 70,000 leagues beneath the surface of the earth, approximately 210,000 miles down, deeper than the distance from Earth to the Moon. Enoch names the beings locked there. He describes the conditions of their imprisonment. He records what they did to deserve it and how long they will remain. In the next several minutes, you'll see who Enoch says is chained in the deepest prison in creation, and why the Church removed every reference to them from the Bible. If forbidden biblical history fascinates you, hit subscribe. Every week we uncover what was removed from Scripture. But here's what makes this stranger. The passage appears primarily in chapters 10, 18, and 21 of the Book of the Watchers, the oldest section of Enoch. Fragment 4Q203, stored at the shrine of the book, contains 12 lines of chapter 10 in Aramaic. Carbon dating places it at 150 BCE. The complete text exists in Ge'ez manuscripts preserved by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church at Axum. Dr. Michael Knibb, who produced the standard Oxford translation in 1978, identified chapter 21 as containing the most specific description of angelic imprisonment in any ancient Jewish text. Not vague, specific. The chapter names individual prisoners, describes the layout of the facility, and provides measurements. Chapter 21, verse 7, uses the Ge'ez term Mekon Tesfa, which translates as place of binding. Not metaphorical binding, physical restraint. Enoch describes chains, darkness, fire, and a depth measurement that should not appear in ancient cosmology. And this is where it gets disturbing. The text doesn't present this as allegory or prophetic vision. Enoch writes in first person, past tense, describing a location he claims to have visited. Chapter 18, verse 11 says, "I saw there 7 stars like great burning mountains, and they cried out to me." He's not interpreting symbols, he's recording what he observed. Verse 14 specifies these are angels being punished for violating God's command. Then chapter 21, verse 10, provides the depth. 70,000 leagues downward from the place where heaven and earth meet. A league in ancient measurement equals approximately 3 miles. 70,000 leagues is 210,000 miles. The Earth's core is 3,958 miles down. Enoch is describing something far deeper than the planet itself. Either he's working with a cosmology we don't understand, or he's describing a spatial dimension that doesn't correspond to physical depth. The number is too specific to be symbolic. What we're looking at is a catalog of the imprisoned. The text begins by identifying the leaders. Chapter 10, verse 4, names the first prisoner, Azazel. The archangel Raphael is commanded to bind Azazel hand and foot, throw him into darkness, cover him with sharp and jagged rocks, and leave him there until the day of judgment. The Ge'ez specifies the location as Dudael, which scholars identify as a region in the Judean wilderness. But chapter 18 makes clear this is only the entrance. The actual prison extends far below. Azazel is described as the chief of the fallen angels, the one who taught humanity weapon-making, metallurgy, cosmetics, and sorcery. His crime? Corrupting human civilization with forbidden knowledge. But the text doesn't stop there. Chapter 10, verse 11, names the second prisoner, Shemyaza, also called Semyaza. The archangel Michael is told to bind Shemyaza and his associates for 70 generations beneath the earth. Shemyaza was the leader of the 200 Watchers who descended to Mount Hermon, took human women as wives, and produced the Nephilim. Chapter 6, verse 3, lists him as the one who convinced the others to swear an oath binding them all to the plan. His crime? Organizing the rebellion. His sentence? Buried alive for 70 generations, which in ancient Jewish reckoning equals 2,100 years. The text says the binding occurred before the flood. That sentence should have ended around the time of Christ. What follows in chapter 69 is stranger still. The text names 20 leaders of the Watchers and describes what each one taught humanity. Barakel taught astrology, the signs of the stars. Kokabiel taught the constellations, the patterns of the heavens. Ezekiel taught knowledge of the clouds, meteorology, and weather prediction. Arachiel taught the signs of the earth, geology and minerals. Shamsiel taught the signs of the sun, solar cycles and timekeeping. Sariel taught the course of the moon, lunar phases and calendars. Akibil taught signs, symbolic systems and omens. Tamiel taught astronomy, the structure of the cosmos. Asaradel taught the motion of the moon, orbital mechanics. Each one is named. Each one has a specific domain of knowledge they passed to humans. Each one is listed as imprisoned in the deep place Enoch describes in chapter 21. But what the text reveals goes deeper. Chapter 69, verses 4 through 12, continues the roster. Penemu taught humanity the art of writing with ink and paper. Literacy itself was forbidden knowledge. Kazdeja taught the striking of the embryo in the womb, abortion and birth control. Gadriel taught the making of weapons of death, not just swords, but instruments of war. Ramwell taught augury, divination through observation. Danjal taught the smiting of spirits, exorcism and spiritual warfare. Ezekiel taught knowledge of the clouds and omens in the sky. Araziel taught the signs of the earth and how to read them. The list is exhaustive. The text names them because they are real entries in a real catalog. Each name corresponds to a specific domain of knowledge that was not supposed to be given to humanity. Each prisoner is serving time for a specific offense. The pattern reads less like mythology and more like a case file. And then comes the part modern readers miss. Chapter 18, verse 13, describes what Enoch saw when he looked into the prison. He writes, "I saw the winds which turn the sky and cause the disk of the sun and all the stars to set, and over the earth I saw the winds which support the clouds." This isn't poetry. Enoch is describing atmospheric and celestial mechanics from a perspective beneath the earth, looking up through layers. He then says in verse 14, "I saw the winds on the earth which carry the clouds, and I saw the paths of the angels. I saw at the ends of the earth the firmament of heaven above." He's describing the view from inside the prison, looking outward through what he calls the ends of the earth. The prisoners are not in a cave. They're in a containment structure located in a place where normal spatial geometry doesn't apply. Here's what the translators left out. The standard English edition of Enoch, based on R.H. Charles's 1906 translation, condenses chapter 21, verse 6 to read, "And beyond these I went to another place more terrible than this." Generic, vague. But the Ge'ez manuscript at Aksum contains specifics that Western editions omit. Dr. Ephraim Isaac, who translated the Ethiopian text for Oxford in 1983, noted the passage was shortened in most published versions because it describes spatial relationships inconsistent with terrestrial geography. The full text, translated directly, reads, "And beyond these I went to another place, more terrible, where I saw 7 stars bound together like great mountains, and burning with fire. And I asked regarding them, and the angel said to me, 'For what sin are these bound here?' And he answered, 'This is the place of completion of heaven and earth. It serves as a prison for the stars and the powers of heaven. And the stars which roll over the fire are they which have transgressed before their rising, because they did not come forth at their appointed times.'" What modern readers don't realize is that Enoch describes a functional detention system with different security levels. Chapter 22 divides the underworld into compartments. He writes that he saw 4 hollow places separated from each other. The first holds the righteous dead awaiting resurrection. The second holds sinners who were never punished on earth. The third holds the murdered who cry out for justice. The fourth holds the watchers who corrupted humanity. But chapter 21 describes something deeper than chapter 22's 4 compartments. The prison at 70,000 leagues is not for dead humans. It's for the angels who led the rebellion. The text describes it as separate from the holding places of human souls, deeper, darker, and permanent. The beings there are not awaiting trial. They have been sentenced. The part that shouldn't be possible is the depth measurement, 70,000 leagues. Enoch wrote this between 300 and 200 BCE. In 2023, a team at the University of Tokyo published research in Nature Geoscience describing anomalous seismic readings detected at the core mantle boundary, 1,800 miles beneath the surface. The readings suggest the existence of structures the paper calls ultra-low velocity zones, regions where seismic waves slow dramatically, indicating a material composition different from the surrounding mantle. The structures are geometrically regular, arranged in patterns that don't match natural geological formation. The lead researcher, Dr. Satoru Tanaka, stated in an interview that the zones behave as if they are boundaries around discrete volumes, not gradual transitions. Enoch described chambers. Modern seismology detects bounded zones. In 2019, researchers at MIT analyzing gravitational data from the GRACE satellite mission detected mass concentrations deep within the Earth's mantle that the study describes as inconsistent with uniform density distribution. The paper, published in Science, notes that these concentrations are located at depths that correspond to approximately 1,500 miles, nowhere near 210,000 miles, but far deeper than any known geological process should produce isolated high-density regions. The structures appear to be separated from each other, compartmentalized. Enoch described separate prisons for separate prisoners. The data shows separate anomalies. The suppression starts at the Council of Laodicea in 364 CE. Church leaders removed Enoch from the Bible. The stated reason? It contained too much detail about fallen angels. But the council records show another concern. Canon 60 prohibits texts that name the angels held in punishment and describe the places of their binding. The church taught that Satan and his angels were cast into hell, a spiritual realm of punishment. Enoch taught that specific named beings were imprisoned in specific measurable locations beneath the earth. One framework is abstract, the other is concrete. The church chose abstract. Jerome, compiling the Latin Vulgate around 400 CE, writes in his preface that Enoch makes fantastic claims about the imprisonment of angels in places accessible by measurement. He doesn't dispute that angels fell, he disputes that their prison has coordinates. Augustine, in The City of God, argues that Enoch's descriptions of angelic prisons should be read as moral allegory, not geographical fact, Because the places of punishment exist outside creation, not within it. But Enoch says within, 70,000 leagues down, inside creation, beneath the earth. The Ethiopian Church, operating independently of Rome, kept Enoch in its canon. When James Bruce brought 3 Ge'ez manuscripts to Europe in 1773, the chapters describing the deep prison and the named prisoners were translated. Oxford scholars called them theologically problematic in an 1821 review. The problem was specificity. Names can be checked, measurements can be tested, but what the standard translation hides is this. R.H. Charles, in his 1906 English edition, rendered the names of the imprisoned angels using Hebrew transliterations that obscure their meanings. Azazel becomes a name without translation. But in the Ge'ez and Aramaic texts, these are descriptive terms. Azazel means God strengthens. Shemyaza means the name has seen. Barakel means lightning of God. Each name describes a function or attribute the being possessed before imprisonment. Dr. Margaret Barker, former president of the Society for Old Testament Study, noted in a 2008 paper that Charles's translation choices removed the semantic content from the angel names, rendering them as proper nouns rather than titles. The text isn't listing people, it's listing roles. The beings imprisoned are identified by what they once did. Now here's where it gets active. In 2005, a geophysics team from Caltech submitted a grant application to the National Science Foundation, requesting funding to place a seismic monitoring array in the Dead Sea region to map deep mantle structures beneath the Levant. The application specified the goal was to identify anomalous boundaries at depths exceeding 1,000 kilometers. The grant was approved. In 2008, the team published preliminary findings indicating the detection of geometrically regular zones at a depth of approximately 2,200 kilometers. In 2009, the lead researcher, Dr. Robert Clayton, gave a presentation at the American Geophysical Union Conference, suggesting the zones might represent ancient subducted material in unusual configurations. In 2011, Clayton was asked in an interview whether further research was planned. He stated that the project had concluded and the team's focus had shifted to other regions. No follow-up study has been published. Now, let me be clear. I'm not saying there are literal angels chained in a dungeon 210,000 miles beneath our feet. The Book of Enoch is not a seismology report. But what the text describes, when read carefully, matches a pattern modern geophysics confirms. Discrete zones at extreme depth, separated from each other, bounded rather than gradual, located beneath the region where Enoch lived and wrote. He had no tools to map the deep mantle. He had no way to know that structures exist at depths far below the crust. He had no reason to specify 70,000 leagues unless he was working from a tradition that preserved a number tied to something real. And yet the text sits there, in Aramaic and Ge'ez, in fragments found at Qumran, saying what it has said for 2,200 years. What we have to confront is the simplest explanation that fits the evidence. If seismic data shows bounded zones in the deep mantle, if gravitational measurements detect isolated mass concentrations, if the text names specific beings and assigns them to specific depths, using a measurement system that produces a number far deeper than ancient cosmology should contain, then the text is not mythology. It's documentation. Enoch is preserving a tradition that describes something beneath the earth, something separated into levels, something containing entities the tradition identified by function and name. He wrote it down with the same systematic precision you'd use filling out a prisoner intake form. The beings he names: Azazel, who taught weapons; Shemyaza, who led the rebellion; Barakel, who taught the stars; Kokabeel, who taught the constellations, and the others imprisoned with them, are either symbols we've misunderstood for 2 millennia, or they are exactly what Enoch says: imprisoned, named, bound in darkness at a depth that defies conventional geography, waiting for a sentence that has not yet been carried out. The manuscripts remain in Aksum, locked in stone chapels. The fragments sit in Jerusalem, catalogued and studied. The seismic data is public, peer-reviewed, verifiable. Anomalous zones exist in the deep mantle. Bounded structures appear at depths conventional geology cannot explain. And in a text the Church removed from the Bible 17 centuries ago, a man named Enoch describes descending to the deepest prison in creation, shown the angels bound there, told their names and their crimes, given a measurement of 70,000 leagues that places them deeper than the planet should allow. The prison is still there, the zones are still there, and the names are still recorded, exactly the way Enoch wrote them.